Cool. We're live. Thank you very much. So this is the first time we've used Teams live in anger. So hopefully this goes as well as our rest of our webinars go. But thank you for joining everybody. So welcome to our first inaugural roundtable. Roundtable event. So this is the first one we've done. My name is Markham, and this is Giles. Say hi, Giles.
Hi.
So we're just going to go through a bit of an introduction, overview of the roundtable, and then we'll kick off. But again, thanks for joining. The roundtable for me is really about sharing experiences from our community. So sharing Giles's experience, my experience, and our guests' experience as well. When I was in industry and I was in a commercial role, I was sometimes felt lost, and sometimes it was lonely to actually go and articulate or gain or learn about topics from people across industry who were specialists, and I found it quite difficult to go and consume that information from others. Yeah, you could do a training course, you could do one of those 5-day training courses and pass your test at the end of it, great, but actually getting real life pragmatic examples of practices, best practice, things that work well, things that didn't work well, was really lacking for me. It's obviously grown a lot now with podcasts coming on and webinars being more prevalent in this day and age, but I thought, hey, we've got a community of people, we've got some great resources, some great experienced people that have got great stories to tell. So over the next 12 months now, we'll be doing one of these a month, and we'll be bringing in a specialist from across our network and Giles's network as well. And so yeah, that's the kind of background, the backdrop to the roundtable. So background to myself, for those who haven't joined one of the iCoTech webinars. So my name is Joel Markham. I'm the CEO and founder of iCoTech Group. But if you go way back to the start, attempted school, attempted university, got a job in Welsh Water and built my first PMO in Welsh Water many years ago, under the guidance and leadership of some great influential figures that were there at the time. I then went to Lloyds Banking Group and helped one of the projects to sell the TSB arm of the Lloyds Banking Group, and then I went over to Babcock International Group, and I spent 5 years I started as like a project manager for a week, and then I got picked up and moved into a different role, always in program, portfolio, project delivery of technology and business change across all regions in the world, really. And then I think 26 years old, I was the head of projects and governance for Babcock International Group, which is pretty proud achievement, I guess. One of the very few things I'm proud of. But yeah, and I got lots of scars, lots of lessons in delivery of portfolios and programs across that organisation, which was really great. So just a kind of scene setting. We really want this to be an interactive session as much as possible. So we have got a Q&A. So you can at any point in the conversation put a question into the chat window, and me and Giles will do our best to answer it. If it's not appropriate, then we'll answer it at that point. We'll answer it at the end of the session. We'll kind of capture a few of these things as we towards the end of the session and answer all of them. If you've got any feedback on these sessions, either me or Giles, if you want to tell us we're rubbish, because we probably are, then please do email us at info@icotechservices.co.uk, and we'll take on board your feedback and always look to continually improve these sessions going forward. Yeah, and even if you want to get involved, so if you want to come and present at one of these sessions, you've got a story to tell, you've got a topic to present on, you just want to get involved, please do feel free to email us at that email address, and we'll put you into the schedule and formulate a topic that we think is worth sharing across the wider community. And me and Giles have talked about this in terms of what it could be in the future, and Giles is kindly agreed to co-host this with me for the next 12 months. So it's a little project we're embarking on together. So I'm really happy and thankful for Giles to sharing the load with me and to coming on this journey with us. Yeah, we are literally not just talking about projects. It could be life, leadership, anything really. So yeah, I think any topics that you feel are worthwhile discussing, please do let us know and share. So I'm going to hand over to Giles now, and Giles is going to introduce himself and run through his background.
Just a bit of background from myself. So I have a slightly different background to Joel, a bit more formal and a bit more structured. I would say so. I went to university and joined the military. So I joined the Royal Engineers. Spent 5 years in the engineers, did some cool stuff there, obviously a little bit of prioritizing in those roles. Then I moved to a consultancy and then onto TfL, and then finally found myself in the civil service. So slightly different route, but really that Joel and I really found sort of something between the two of us that was really interesting, that we're both sort of focused on that in continual improvement, trying to learn, trying to get that best practice, trying to really sort of work out the core issues around some of the problems that we face. And prioritization is a really good one to start with, because that's something we both worked on together in Bays when I was head of project delivery in Bays Digital. So looking forward to this and looking forward to the next 12 months. So we'll kick off from there, Joel.
Why the topic about prioritization? Do businesses really prioritize? Why this topic? For me, of course, COVID. Everybody knows COVID has been an absolute distraction and re-pivoting for every business, every person, every family in the world. It's a massive event, a journey that we can all kind of use in some way to be a positive reflection of how we handled the situation. Something I think is just amazing is how humanity can get together and just create a vaccine for something new in such a short amount of time, and that just really it makes me proud, I guess, to be on the planet and be part of the community and be part of a society that can do that. But also, it's just amazing how people can prioritize to bring good and outcomes and pivot ourselves to resolving a really important problem. Separately, then, I've got a PPM background, so project delivery background, and prioritization was always one of those things that was always that hot topic, but something that really wasn't always achieved in the best way, and something that I thought that could be achieved in the most simplest form in a pragmatic way. So we'll come on to that in a bit more detail, but that's kind of why prioritization is the topic for myself. And then obviously running a business. So iCoTech, we were founded in 2018, started in 2018, and the first 6 months were a bit were nothing really, but so we've been going 18 months now, and we've grown to 11 people in total now, and so we've definitely had to prioritize, and I've got some deep scars of where we've not prioritized and where we failed, and where we've had to refocus our energies. And I think everybody in a department or a project setting or in any walk of life can learn about prioritization. And I think it's an interesting and pertinent topic of conversation as to, and a question to ask ourselves, and is to do businesses actually prioritize, how, why, and when. I think it's the general topic. I just thought all those things together created a pertinent conversation for me and Giles and Kerry. Unfortunately, Kerry obviously isn't able to attend, so you're stuck with just me and Giles's view on this. But the reason why Kerry was invited to this session was because Kerry and Betty St Taylor's, the company that she works for, I think they did prioritization quite well. In how they did PPM prioritization quite well, and I'll come on to a little bit of that in a few moments' time throughout the session. And my summary view, I think, is that I think everybody does prioritize. So my position on this question is that everybody does prioritize. Do they do it consciously? No. Do they do it in the right way? No. Do they do it strategically? Probably not. But I think everybody prioritizes based on the things that are most important to them at the time. So whether it's the bills that are coming out at the end of the month, or your kids have got nursery birthdays coming up, or your business has got a year end, or your project's about to go live, we do prioritize naturally by things that are most important to us as humans. But is that the right way of doing it? Probably not. And when you're leading a team and a group of experts, and I think it gets exponentially harder to achieve that outcome, and to achieve the multiple facets and requirements that underpin that outcome or objective. I think prioritization could be done better. I just think it's a natural human instinct to prioritize. And do businesses do it effectively? Probably not in many cases, but I'm sure there's definite cases where they do it really well as well, and that's hence why we wanted to bring Kerry in to show you how you can do it well. But I'll use this session as to outplay, I think, later on the ways it is done well. So that's my summary position. Giles, what's your view on the answer to the question?
I think pretty similar to you, to be honest, Joel. I think businesses do prioritize, but I think in reality, going back to your point, we all prioritize. We all prioritize in every sort of walk of our life. I prioritize at home. But I think it's sort of understanding what you're prioritizing for me, is the key within the business. So look into your strategy and working out what you're prioritizing for. So it's all very well and good prioritizing, but if it is not aligned to the strategy and to your business benefits and your business case, or your understanding of what your business is trying to deliver and what the outcome is for the business, I think that prioritization can really be lost. So I think with the work that I've done, and we'll come on to the work that we did together, and that's some of the fleshing out the prioritization of the work within BASE. But my current position, I said I look at the civil service and I think they're sort of conflicting priorities. So I was talking to Lauren, the producer, just before the start of the show, and I was saying, well, actually the civil service has got multiple different stakeholders who have conflicting priorities. So each department has a minister and they have their set of ministerial direction and what that minister wants to achieve. But then you have higher level sort of government level objectives and their priorities. But you also then have functional priorities. So from my role within technology, there are technology changes and developments that I would like to prioritize across the civil service, but they don't align directly with the immediate priorities of each of the departments. So then there's a clash of those priorities. So then you have to take that step up and you have to think, okay, what's the strategy? What are we trying to achieve? And then use that as your prioritization. And we can come on to what we did about sort of the 100 points or looking at ways to sort of understand what that prioritization is. But that's kind of where I think it's, we all prioritize, but we do it in a sort of a haphazard way, or we set up a prioritization without aligning to the strategy. So we go, yeah, great, we've got a prioritization model, and yeah, we're doing it collectively across X director or X department, but does that align to the business and the business strategy? So that's kind of where I sit, and we can move on to it. But I just think that's probably, and from a business perspective, actually, from your side of things, understanding your strategy and how you then prioritize and align to your strategy would probably be a good place to sort of fill in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Giles, I totally agree. And thank you for the questions that are coming in as well. It's fantastic. So one of the questions that's coming in is, what are the most common impacts on businesses if there's a lack of consistent or structure with prioritization? So definitely for me, speaking on behalf of iCoTech, I guess, is, we're a small business. I'm not going to, we're not in the same league or have the same challenges that BASE have, but definitely lack of outputs, and failure of meeting objectives is the real impact of not prioritizing. Failure to failure to not achieve your objectives or outcomes is really one of the biggest things that I fear, I guess, in any facet of the life for me. But talking about those multidisciplinary, policy departments, Giles, and I think that prioritization should absolutely stem from the strategy, and BASE did this really well, and they kind of pointed their objectives, their strategic objectives, into kind of categories, and then every project would link to those categories then, and based on the weighting of the strategic direction or the strategic value, you could put a calculated value to a project or an activity, and that was really top down. That was projects to just small activities to renewable, repeat processes as well, and I took a bit of that into my business, into my example, and every department, or there's two of them in iCoTech, has a set of objectives, a set of KPIs that are weighted and prioritized against each other, and then that links to our overall strategic objective as well, and that links to having a strategy. So I've got I did a 3-year vision in orbit at the start of the iCoTech journey, and that had all the facets of where we wanted to go in terms of revenue, in terms of our product set, in terms of our geographical locations, all these aspirations, and we really put threw darts at the ball and went, this is where we're going to be in 3 years' time. And actually I went through each of those visual items, those functions, and I scored them from 1 to 23 or whatever it was, and that's how I weighted the priority. And now every one of the KPIs, although there's a small handful, I'm talking there's 10 KPIs in our business, it's not as complex as a government department, of course, but the principle is still the same, in that the roles have objectives, the roles have KPIs, they meet to a departmental KPI and a departmental objective that then meets to the overall area as well. So I think and the impact for us of not having those priorities defined in a structured approach is that we would fail, right? We'd just fail as a business, but the impact for Bays might be different.
Yeah, I think that, so when you look at those impacts, I suppose it depends how you want to look at it. When I present back and I try and explain why it's important to prioritize, when I speak to leadership and I say, well, these are the things, here are your options, here's the level of funding, which direction you want to go, it depends how you want to look at it. And there are impacts of siloed approach to work. So you dilute the benefits of the funding, the money that you have available. So for example, if there are 10 departments, so using the civil service again as a sort of as a model, each department is run fairly separately. So if each department has a technology stack and they want to deliver, let's say, a new tool for project management, each department may end up going through the same discovery process and the same sort of deployment of a tool that every other department goes through. So you dilute the impact. So I think looking at it and saying actually there are benefits to prioritization rather than looking at the negative impacts. And I think that's always improved how I've been able to influence leadership, is to say, here are the real business benefits. This is what your cost avoidance, this is the improved efficiency, your improved productivity, reduced security implications, that type of thing. Those are the things that I kind of look at. So when we had a look at Bays, so when Joel came in, iCoTech, and this is how I met Joel, when we worked together on Bays's prioritization, what we were initially looking at is, or what the question was initially to Joel was, how do we set up a portfolio management tool? And then Joel rolled through these things that actually, well, yeah, okay, let's take a step back. What's your prioritization? What do you really need? We did that user research. So I think within the prioritization, he's even there saying, actually, well, first you want a PPM tool, but how are you going to prioritize the projects? Because that will then define how we structure that portfolio management tool.
Yeah, and we did a pointed system in Bays, didn't we, where we scored each of the projects on a point by point basis, which I thought was quite interesting, quite good as a model. And that just gave you a pointed system out between 0 and 100, didn't you? And you were able to see all the projects and just kind of see them in a list view. And I think any form of prioritization is appropriate. It doesn't have to be a really complex solution like a really mature solution like the Bays and Taylor's approach. It doesn't have to be something that we did relatively quickly with Giles and Bays and got something in that was useful at the time, and it could be a lot more simpler than my approach where I'm linking KPIs together. But one of the things I wanted to challenge and ask you, Giles, I guess, is have you ever seen projects stop as a result of prioritization?
I think a lot of the time with projects, Joel, they just keep going until they die a death. I think it's really difficult for someone to stand up. I think it's improving. The reality is and it depends what industry you're in. I think technology is a really good industry to be in, so that you can then look at projects and say, actually, we've done the discovery, or we've done alpha, or we've done the initial stage of it, and actually, we don't think it's going to solve the problem, or we don't think that that's the right project. And I think because of that iterative nature and dare I say, the agile approach, that's the whole point. You can make those decisions, you can make those calls to say, actually, we're going to stop this project. Or from a priorities perspective, if a new minister comes in within the civil service, or we have something like COVID or EU exit, you can then put projects on hold or stop projects because you want to focus on something else that doesn't align to your strategy. And this kind of answers the second question that came in about reviewing business priorities. So we had a strategy that was a 3-year strategy within Bays in digital, which is great, and it gives you that structure, what we're trying to aim towards, how we're trying to be X or Y. However, EU exit came along, or Brexit, and then the impact of EU exit, and then COVID, and all of these things impact you. So I say you've got the strategy, we'll review it on a yearly basis, but then when an extraordinary event comes along, you've then got to review that strategy, and then it will have a knock-on effect with your prioritization.
I've just, yeah, it's a really important point, you know, to review that strategy, to review that vision. But I've seen, in terms of my experience of where I've seen prioritization go wrong, is when we've come up with a prioritization model and nothing stopped. And I think it's really important that, you know, it's funny though, at the bottom of the pile was this project that had been going on for 3 years, and it had, you know, a 3-year projection. It's like, oh, why don't we stop, you know, stop the project? And that's just one of my things I do in my life is you know, it's stop, start, continue. It's something that Andy, my non-exec, helped me with. It's just stop, start, continue. It's something that I do on a frequent basis, and I think it's really important to take those things, do that analysis, do the prioritization, do your model, whether it's simple, complex, really mature, but actually do something differently as a result of the model, do something differently as a result of the outcome. And yeah, I was interested to hear your view there on, you know, do projects actually stop? It's just something that's pertinent to me, and something I woke up last night, I thought.
Yeah, I would have to say, I mean, in reality, when we first started using the PPM tool that was developed by iCoTech for Bays, and we were using the prioritization, to begin with, we didn't stop any projects because we were still coming to grips with the prioritization. It was something we hadn't done. It was something that we weren't used to. And it goes back to your point, actually, doing something starts you on that journey to develop your ability. And this goes back to like your really early point when you first came on air, was what you need to do is you need to start on that journey, and you need to start progressing. You need to start learning, how do I learn about prioritization? You can talk to people, you can listen to podcasts, but actually starting that journey and start doing something. We were terrible probably at, or I can't speak for my colleagues, but I would speak for myself. We're terrible at it to begin with. You've got multiple priorities going on. You've got your life, you've got work, you've got exit, all this kind of stuff. But slowly, as we worked through the prioritization module, and we went through the meetings, we met weekly and we started reviewing them, it started to become much more natural. And I think starting that process, yeah, we weren't good at it to begin with, but then we started to make those decisions and make those harder decisions about what can we do, what can we outsource, what doesn't align to strategy. So we turn around and actually then present back questions to those people who are asking for problem solving and asking us to solve their problems. You can say, actually, these are the right things that align to our strategy. And that was all fed out of that prioritization. So,
Mark, thank you for yours about projects being stopped. You know, and yeah, I think it is really about understanding the strategy first, and then, you know, scoring those projects against the strategic direction. And if you don't have a strategy, then what the project's doing, in my view, you know, what they're trying to achieve, other than just keep the lights on and be reactive. And for me, it's literally, you know, as a portfolio manager, I was always looking kind of 12 months, 24 months out in advance. Like, where does this company, where does this organization want to be in 12 months time? And, you know, and also just side note, if a strategy is 25 pages long in a Word document, that ain't a strategy to me. But we'll have another topic on that one. What is good strategy? But, you know, it's just a way of communicating just some high level objectives of where you need to be, and so we can align projects or activities, you know, BAU activities, to those strategic directions, those strategic themes. And you know, how do iCoTech support SMEs in regards to prioritization? Yeah, we can only do that in a project sense, but as Giles says, you know, it is about a portfolio of projects being linked to the strategy, and you know, and controlling the delivery of the executing of those projects, and working out which projects are most value to the business, and therefore which ones are to be done next in the systems and the techniques and the processes that we use, which I think is really important.
I've got a question for you, Joel, on the back of that question that Mark posed. It's your comparison between iCoTech and the prioritization you can do and your experience in large organizations. Because you've worked in those two sort of separate environments, you've got a good opportunity within iCoTech to be agile, to respond, to change your strategy quite easily. When you look at some of the big projects, say within Babcock, some of those large projects, when you get a strategic change in direction and you start reprioritizing, it's really tough for leadership to make those big calls around cancelling projects or stopping projects that then don't align to those priorities because they've already funded them for a long time. So I suppose my question to you is, what's the difference? Potentially it's not easier, but what's the difference do you feel between the prioritization in a small company like your own and a large company? And do you think that it's either or, do it better?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Giles. Put me on the spot there. Great question. I think, yeah, it's absolutely fun. It's a different challenge, isn't it? When you've got a £200 million project, an ERP migration, who's gonna stop that? Somebody at the top of that tree is gonna make a decision there, isn't it? But I don't know. My opinion is that. It comes back to the question really about the impacts of stopping the project. I mean, if it needs to stop, if it needs to reform and reshape, then make the decision and make it, understand it and do it. I think I would much rather stop rather than keep going and fail. I don't know, it's just my personality type. I think I would just, if I kept buried my head in the sand and kept going because I'd done this business case, I would much rather put a project on hold, put a program on hold, reevaluate the priorities, reevaluate the scope, and reevaluate what the outcomes are, the objectives are. And yes, some of these projects in old world, hey, before Agile came along, some of these projects were 5 years long. I do think that the Agile methodology has helped improve the outcomes of projects, major projects, but I do still think that we're inherently kind of accustomed to bulking things together, and I see a lot of big organizations grouping activities together into a single program, and therefore the components of the whole thing is just so much harder to stop. If you keep trying to if you keep them separate as individual lines of activity, it's a lot easier to stop one of those things, individual components, because you can just unplug it and carry on with the other three. That's my take on that question. But yeah, great question, and I can definitely sympathize with people who are involved in delivering major capital projects of multi-million-pound investments, and it's a different kettle of fish to how we do it in iCoTech, where we're just focused purely on the value for the customer and going, should we stop this? But I think it's good to to have that mindset that you stop before trying to trudge on through and deliver something that's not right. We've had conversations before where I've come to you and said, Giles, this isn't right. Like, we've got to stop this deliverable because it's not right. As much as it pains me, because we've had a conversation, you've justified it. We've had a couple of conversations, and I think it's just good just to stop, rather than me deliver that deliverable that you didn't actually need at that point in time, and it'd be a wasted value, wasted investment. I came to you and said, look, let's change it, and we swapped it out because we changed direction, didn't we?
So I think from that point, I really love that. I think your point around the big projects being able to make that decision, I think the hardest point in that is taking the time to do the review. So when you've got money going out the door, you've got a large project that's being delivered, and then you're like, actually, we need to pause because we need to review this priority. We need to review whether this really aligns with our strategy and what we're prioritizing. You've got a whole bunch of people delivering that project, delivering that program or whatever. You've then got to put that on hold for a period of time, potentially. So I think there is a sort of there needs to be, I suppose it goes back to a point of someone making big decisions. They need to be able to say, actually, this, in the long run, this is potentially going to cost us more money if we continue down this path. So we need to really look at the benefits for the business, and then we need to think, all right, actually, does this align with our strategy? Are we prioritizing the right work? If we then fund the rest of the project, what could we not fund, which would actually align with our priorities? So yeah, it's really hard. And I think sort of those big projects, sort of from a Babcock's or TFL, where I used to work, and that's kind of what generated the question in my mind, because working at TFL on multi-billion pound projects, I was a very small part of it. I wasn't delivering a multi-billion pound project, but you look at all of it and you think, actually, do we just, because of the fact that we've invested so much, do we just keep delivering, or can we make decisions that actually reduce the cost of the project? Can we pause parts of the project? Can we deliver it later, or can we deliver it in a different way? And does it really align with what we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's another question that came through. I'm not sure at what point it came through in my spiel of the stopping projects, or my but yeah, there's another comment here that's saying that they work for a government agency and use the value framework to prioritize, but we struggle. What we struggle with is stopping things, and I think that's that's really pertinent. And it would be great to Yeah, to see that in industry, I think projects stopping, and I think agile aligns us to that. And you implied it earlier with technology projects being more agile. We're able to stop at the end of alphas or betas or private betas or whatever it is, and I think that's a really good thing. And I think one of the questions earlier on was about how frequently you should review the priorities and objectives. And yeah, great question. There's probably no right answer to that, is there? But my opinion is monthly. I think because things change so quickly that just a quick review of your priorities, a quick review of a prioritization is really important, and not do it in Excel on a document that never ever gets seen again. Do it in a system, do it in a system that you can continually utilize the data and feed in resource, feed in costs, feed in risk, feed in the strategies, this multifaceted approach really to bring all this information together and let it give you a score. If we're doing prioritization in an Excel spreadsheet that's stored on SharePoint, love a bit of SharePoint, but that you never see again and you can't find, and somebody else does it, and it's not it's just never going to really work, is it? And but when you do it right, I really hope that people do start projects in industry, because in my experience in actual industry, but also from a solution implementation part, I don't often see projects being stopped, and I think that's a cultural thing. It's probably a fear of failure, isn't it? It's probably that committed to, admitting to it, and that's
so
interesting.
Just on that point of systems, I get just moving slightly away from the sort of, well, we could talk all day about these topics, but talking about the systems, and one of the things I really like about the systems and the system that we put in place was it provides transparency. So if you can provide access to that system, if it's in an Excel spreadsheet or if it's done behind closed doors and you're just all sitting in a room making a decision on, well, we're going to take this project forward, or the other way, you just do any project that comes along because you've got funding or you're there to do it and other people are driving that work. If you can create that transparency, it brings those people together. That was one of the big questions from employees within or colleagues within digital was, actually, we want to be able to see what we're doing. What are we delivering? How are we delivering? Where are we in the process? And they can then turn around and go, actually, I'm part of a really important piece of work. And again, if you're in Babcock's or if you're in TfL or wherever you are, if you can turn around and say, this is how you are impacting the business and this is how you're improving things, this is what we're trying to achieve, it's really valuable. And I think that's several of the people came back to me and were like, actually, we don't know what we're doing. We don't have transparency. I'm doing my little bit over here, but how am I impacting on the wider piece and the business outcomes? And so if you can provide that, say, here's your part, you're delivering these, this is working with this department, and this department is delivering grants, or this department is delivering this new network infrastructure in TfL, or you are delivering on this thing from a military perspective. Yeah, absolutely. It then adds value to that person as an employee. They're not just another cog in the wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that as well, visibility is absolutely important, because there's probably a study out there somewhere which I should have reviewed when this point came to mind a few weeks ago, but I always think it's good to see what you've got on your list in one place, in one repository. What are the activities that are going on across the portfolio? I think it's always good to see the projects, or in my view, we use Planner. We're just, Laura will tell you, we're a Planner obsessed, and just seeing everything in one place, seeing the things that you're not doing yet because they're low priority, seeing the things that are medium priority and high priority. In that view, at a task level, an activity level is really important for us and important for me, I guess, as an individual. I like seeing that I've got all this stuff that I could be doing that I'm not doing, and I've got all this stuff that I am doing. It's really important to me, and that's just real basics. But I think that's, if you could apply that to a portfolio level, and Giles, you'd have seen this in Bays and in your other experiences, where a list of 200 projects and not all of them are live, not all of them are starting. There are some that are on hold, some that are going to put on the back burner starting next year. and then some that are never going to be done, are cancelled. I think that is a good way of doing it. And for any Teams users out there, Tasks by Planner, if you're not using it, get on it. There's a little app built by Teams. It's we don't sell it. It's just a bit of free advice. Download it. It's Tasks by Planner. It's a fantastic little thing, and it links your planner board into Teams, and you can see it in a list form, which is like, oh my god, changed my life. So a bit of free value.
That's more about the data, and it comes back to your point about prioritization. Once you collect that data over a period of time, you can then use that data to really work out how your prioritization is going. So actually the business benefits that your projects you've delivered, actually have they delivered on what you want to achieve? You can then go back on it and say, how did we deliver these projects? How long did they take? Why did we prioritize that? What was driving that prioritization? Then you can speak to leadership and say, well, we decided to do this project because your strategy said X, Y, and Z, and you really wanted to deliver that. So if they come back in 6 months' time or a year's time and say, why have you spent this money on this? We now are prioritizing whatever, then you've got sort of evidence there to back up why you're delivering stuff. And then at the end of the financial year, you can say, yeah, here we go. This is what we delivered, and this is why we delivered it. So it's just those systems. It's really important.
So I think in summarization then, how could businesses prioritize? I think we've talked about, from the bottom up, in terms of, stop, start, continue. If you're an individual and you're running a small business, I think just having a level of stop, start, continue is really important. Then if you're kind of more in a team, in a small business, then having a linked strategy, a linked set of prioritization or criteria and KPIs to a strategy is important, and reviewing that on a month-by-month basis, like iCoTech, where we've got a 3-year vision, and we're every month we're evaluating our performance against that strategy, which is really important. And at a portfolio level, then it's taking that on another level. It's taking a multifaceted approach with your portfolio data. So using the resources you need to deliver a project, using the benefits of the project, the risks, the costs. Did I say resource? I might have said resource. In using that multifaceted approach and then link that to the strategy, that's really key for me, and how I think I did prioritization well in my corporate world. And then having a strategy that's clearly articulated, it's got some themes or some objectives in there that are weighted, and not everything is as important as the next. And they're not all equally as important. And then coming up with a mathematical way of evaluating that, I think it just gives a kind of non-human objective view of the stats. If you can put some maths and some formula behind it and use a system to bring all that together, it just gives you a view to start from. It'll tell you what's high, medium, and low on comparison with each other. And then, of course, apply some logic to that. The system's not going to know everything, so apply some logic over the top of that, and decide, actually, I know it says it's low, but this one's really high, and you might want to have some top trump cards. You got a top trump, didn't you, Giles, in Bays? Was it the CIO rate card?
No, there was I think it was there was this talk of how do we show what the ministerial decision making, where does that go? So do you look at, actually, you've got an extraordinary event, so you turn around and you say, actually, we've prioritized all these projects, however, this project is critical to whatever ministerial decision, or it has been linked to a government mandate for something, or it's sort of the levelling up agenda or something along those lines. Actually, there's, and for want of a better word, it's called a boost button. So you go, actually, that project to get an extra 100 points or whatever, that absolutely rockets it up the board. And you say, well, that's a reason why, but you could then keep that data. And you said something earlier, we haven't got onto, and I spoke to, again, just while we were discussing this beforehand with Lauren, it was about the resourcing. So we haven't even talked about what prioritization can provide further down the line. And again, something that we can get onto at another time. But what we were trying to get onto, once we had created the prioritization and we had the portfolio and all the projects inside and that project data, was how do we then start forecasting our resources that are required for these projects? So do we have enough internal resource? Do we have the right capability? Are certain people overloaded? Are certain people underutilized? So you've got a whole piece about resourcing there that really is impacted by your prioritization and your choice. Rather than just do everything that comes along, you can then start forecasting costs. You can look at your finances, see whether you need more resources, different types of capability. So yeah, so it just sort of, I suppose, in sort of just summary from sort of my side, it was defining a strategy, creating that prioritization model that aligns to that strategy, review the model sort of regularly in the first instance, like we did, to improve that and to really make it fit for purpose, and then have a regular review of the strategy to ensure that and that regular could be 6 months, could be yearly, depends how long the strategy is for. I'd say normally nowadays probably a couple of years, 3 years maybe as a strategy. So it's a regular review of that strategy, and then if there are any extraordinary events that come along, a pandemic, for example, you can then take another look at your strategy with your leadership team, and you take another look at that prioritization and really see whether it's fit for purpose. And that links to stopping projects, pausing projects. It really does, that prioritization really does impact a lot, because how else do you decide which projects in an extraordinary event, how would you decide which projects to stop? Do you just stop, blanket stop? So yeah, so just sort of my sort of key takeaways there are strategy, prioritization, and then a review.
We're coming up to 10 minutes or 11 minutes to the hour, so we're going to keep on military precision, Giles, on terms of timing. So yeah. So in terms of summarising, so I'm gonna put my summary position out there, which is probably going to be a waffle again. Apologies for that. But as per the start of the session, I think some businesses obviously prioritize well and prioritize really effectively. The Apples, the major successful organizations that have had major growth in such short space of time, they can obviously prioritize and focus in on specific outcomes and objectives. Obviously, a commercial business is totally different to a government department, and it has a much broader use case and requirement, and a set of objectives and strategies and moving parts. It's just not delivered on. It's not focused on generating revenue or paying a dividend at the end of the year, or it's not as clear as that, and therefore it is exponentially harder to prioritize. Effectively in those organizations. And then there's a small SMEs and micro businesses like iCoTech that have to prioritize in order to stay afloat. So, and I think humans definitely, I'll reiterate what I said earlier, humans prioritize every day. We all prioritize on what's most important for us as individuals. And therefore in business, we will always prioritize. But a lot of the time that I see things fail, projects, activities, businesses fail, is when they haven't done it to a mediocre, an acceptable, or a baseline level. And therefore, if you're in a small business or a small team trying to deliver an outcome, my advice is, from my experience, although small albeit, is that you focus on an outcome, you focus on an end point, and that might be a strategy, that might be a vision, that might be an outcome, and then you work back from that. Where do I want to be at the end of this journey, and how do I work out a formula? I'm very data driven. I just need my formulas and maths to go, that's more important than that, that's more important than that. These are my objectives, these are my KPIs, and they all link together. It's got to build that model. And then when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's stop, start, continue. I love those. If I can't sleep at night, I generally have got up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, come downstairs, put the kettle on, I'm going to stop, start, continue. What in my life am I doing today that I need to stop, and what do I need to start doing because I'm not doing it, and what do I need to continue doing? Yeah, I won't tell you the result of that analysis, but that's what my summary position is. And I think organizations that are in the medium segment there, not the majors and the minors like us, but in terms of size, but some of the strategies that I've seen in terms of Betty's and Taylor's, for example, having that multifaceted strategy with all the activities, everything from BAU, minor work, projects to programs to the major transformation change, all evaluated against each other and put into one system, and using those different data sources, the kind of resource, the benefit, the cost, the risk associated to them, using all those items pointed and linked to the strategy and calculated against that, and giving you a top-down approach is really important. And then the last thing I'll say, I told you I was going to waffle, I apologize, is that stop. If you look back through your last year of the project, the work, the portfolio, the program, the business, and you think, did I stop doing anything? I think that's when you need to focus on prioritization and make it part of your weekly, monthly, yearly routine. That's my position.
Yeah. That's a good note to finish on there. Stop. Well done then. Stop. So yeah, I agree with all the stuff you said. I think I'm going to take a slightly different sort of. I agree with what you're saying. I think businesses do prioritize. I think they do it in an ad hoc manner, in my experience. I don't think that businesses may have a specific way to prioritize, but I don't think it's done particularly well. So I'm going to have sort of provide sort of my little bit of advice. Either get some help doing it, which is what we did, or from either a supplier or internally from your project management function, or whoever. So get some help, get someone to help you, get someone to give you sort of a framework, get them to talk you through the prioritization, raise it with leadership. Read about the stuff. So I'm currently working through my my MBA, and part of it has really driven me to reevaluate what I know. So I have done an awful lot of reading, probably too much, and sort of again, so over Christmas I was thinking about prioritizing my own life, and I think I was reading lots and lots of stuff, but not really prioritizing what I was reading. So I was like firing all over the page, loads of different ideas. So there's so much out there on prioritization. Really pick a topic, pick someone, pick a style, choose how you're going to prioritize, and then try it out. Try it out in sort of your team, try it out in your department, offer it up, try and get some workshops going, and then give it a go. It's never going to work first time. Well, it's highly unlikely to work first time. It's never worked first time for me. And then work with those stakeholders, get people involved, ask them what their opinions are, and then iterate it and work through that process and start doing it. It will be painful at first because everyone's going to have different opinions. It'll be really hard, but the benefits down the line are really, really great. And if you can get prioritization right and do it regularly, I think it's a massive win for whatever part of a business you're working in, or like in your personal life as well. So and then it can bleed over. So that's where I leave it on prioritization, Joel. If you've got any real burning issues that you really want to discuss with us, or just you've got an idea for a topic that we can discuss, and we can bring some of our friends, some of the people that we work with, colleagues, just let us know, and then we can then feed that back in and try and find time to set something up, maybe do an extraordinary session.
Yeah, fantastic. That's awesome. So thank you, Giles, for being part of this. Appreciate it.
Joel, great fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And thank you everybody to ask the questions and who attended. Please do stay safe, stay healthy, prioritize as best you can.
Great. Oh, amazing.
was that good?
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you so much. Ciao now.
Bye.